Welcome back to the Athletic Approach. So, for today's episode, we'll be talking about focus. And focus is such a huge topic that everyone wants to know how to be focused, but there's a lot of misconceptions as well that comes with focus and what it means. And one of the key skills that you kind of have to bring with focus is how you switch on and off. But this can be completely sport dependent. So not every game will you need to be focused for the full duration of the game. And that completely depends on the sport, your position, literally anything else that you don't have to be, you'll be drained by the time the game finishes.
Yeah. Athletes are always weirded out when I ask them this question. I did it last week. I was talking with a women's lacrosse team, and they play 60-minute games. And so I always kind of set it up with a trap question. I'm like, hey, so 60 minutes, you guys are out there playing. How long out of those 60 minutes do you think you need to be focused? And immediately they're all 60 minutes, got to be locked in. And I'm like, ha, gotcha. No, wrong. Because like we're saying, focus is so much more than just paying attention. Yeah. The people listening to this right now probably aren't laser focused on it, but they're paying attention. They're listening. They're taking in what we have to say. They might be watching stuff like that, but that's entirely different than a sporting context when you're on the field in competition, the ball in your hands, whatever it is, and you're focused. There's kind of different levels to it. And like you were saying, if you try to be in that laser focused zone for 60 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is, you're just going to fry your brain. And then by the time you get to the end of the game or that kind of key moment toward the end and you really need that focus, you're not going to have much left in the tank. So that's why what you were saying, it's so important to be able to turn this stuff off and on when you need it. It helps kind of preserve that skill to focus and be locked in for when you really need it, and kind of prevent you from overdoing it early and running out of gas at the end.
Yeah, it almost sounds like survival of the fittest, almost you keeping up with your resources until you need it. And it is that, and it's again, I know I refer to so many examples sort of within dance, but depending on what competitions you're at, some competitions that are only one genre of style of dance, you've got different categories. There's other sort of competitions where it'd be multiple styles in a day. And personally for me, I only do hip hop. So these competition days, whilst I was at uni, would be starting at 8 a.m. and they'd finish at 6 p.m. And I do not need to be focused. I mean, I'm asleep actually for some of the time, but it's not until sort of an hour or two before we're on stage is when we'll go over the routine. But we're only marking it. We're not going full out. We're not kind of putting everything into it because we've got confidence in ourselves that we're going to smash it. But if we're not confident, then you're going to take so much time to focus on what it is that you're doing wrong. And that's something that I think is really interesting, because if you keep doing something that you can't do, you will make that mistake on stage. And that is something that I've hugely noticed, that because you're overthinking or you're waiting for it to go wrong because you're focused on what could go wrong instead of what can go right. And that is massive. And even if something goes wrong in a performance, you immediately look at what was bad about it instead of what was good about it. And I think that is so important. And as I said, once you're on stage, you're only really focused for 3 or 4 minutes. And even then, it's muscle memory that takes over in that point in time.
Yeah.
And there's so many times where teachers and choreographers have told me that don't go over the performance, the choreo, right before you go on, because you're overthinking it at that point and you're overtraining yourself.
Yep. Yeah, you're past the point of making changes, really. You don't want to switch everything up because you saw somebody else do something or you're not confident in this move right now. It's too late for that. This is where you kind of got to just go with what you've got and then really lock in for those 2, 3, 4 minutes and let that muscle memory take over and just do your thing.
Yeah.
It's so different in every sport, those like levels of focus. Like I talk about my experience in playing baseball. I'll be the first to admit that baseball games can get way too long. There was, we played 4, 5, 6 hour games. There is absolutely no way I was locked in for 5 hours. Mm-hmm. No. And that was like the beauty of it is in between pitches, I'm playing defense. Once that pitch is thrown and it's not hit, the ball's not in play, it's a ball or a strike or whatever, I can kind of check out for a minute. I can kick the dirt around. I can look up in the stands, see who's here. I can look at the scoreboard, try to figure out, what the count is because I wasn't paying attention or whatever it was. But I'm still not like entirely checking out. Like I'm kind of just like flipping the switch off, but keeping like a back room light on a little bit.
Yeah.
Where I'm still like very aware that like, okay, we're playing a baseball game right now and something's about to happen. But in that moment, like there's no point in me just being like laser focused on my pitcher standing on the mound doing nothing. Like I'm just wasting energy at that point.
Yeah. No.
So instead, then I just put things in place. So when it got closer and closer to those like 10, 15 seconds I needed to pay attention to, then I could flip that switch and get myself back in and then flip it off. Baseball was a lot of just flipping switches for hours on end and trying not to like drain my focus tanks by like the third inning.
Yeah, and then like that is so important, I think, in education as well. So like a lot of these principles can be applied in so much things outside of sport. And one of the things that I sort of picked up on during school was the Pomodoro effect. And that's something where you are like doing revision for 20 minutes and you'll take a 10-minute break. You'll do 20 minutes again, 10-minute break. And again, it's because no one can sit and be focused for so long, for like hours on end, because it's not effective. And having those breaks helps you to focus more on what you're doing. And again, you're not like you say, you're not draining yourself out by doing that. And I think that is just so important. And it can be applied in literally so many different elements of life. Yeah, because if you're, no matter what you're doing, if you do try to stay this like in this laser focused zone for so long, you can either like do it for a little bit and then you're going to crash and run out completely, or you're just going to kind of like idle in the middle for a longer period of time. You won't quite be in that laser focused. You'll be focused, but you're not quite as sharp, and it's just not where you want to be, but it's because you've gone for so long and so long. So if you can turn it off for 10 minutes, take that break, then you come back with this like revitalized ability to do it. And you can really lock in, go after it for a little bit, and then another break. And it's that way in the majority of sports, in some way, shape, or form, have like stops and starts. Whether it's the end of quarters or ball goes out of play or a stoppage, a penalty, whatever it is, when you look at sports from that lens, there's a ton of different opportunities people have to kind of shut their focus off for a minute, regroup, kind of get everything in order, and then lock back in. And being able to like harness and use that skill is such a massive benefit, no matter what sport you're playing. Yeah, and even in training as well as when you're actually playing, like, again, so sort of, and I think one of the big things within sport and especially within dance is comparisons. And I think if you take your focus away to what other people are doing around you, that could benefit you, but then it can also be quite detrimental because you're focusing on what other people are doing and not what you're doing and how you can better yourself. Like a lot of the times, like going to like just going to like an open dance class, anyone can take a class, and immediately if you're thinking, oh, they're so much better than me, how am I going to be able to like dance this routine better than them? Or if you're not picking up the choreography and you're thinking, oh, like everyone's staring at me now and like I'm like the joke of the class, but it's like this spotlight effect, isn't it? And like not everyone's actually looking at you more than you think. Like not that many people care about what you're doing, as like harsh as that sounds, but like not a lot of people do. And again, it's because it can be our like own biggest like critics. So because again, so if you're focused on what's going wrong, that takes up so much energy and so much of your focus on what merely doesn't even exist, because not many people are looking at you. If anything, other people are focused on what they're doing, and that's where their focus is. And then it's like, maybe that could be maybe that's why they're out there killing it, because they're focusing on what they need to do. They're looking at the mirror, they're thinking, okay, this is what I need to work on. But you're not having that same focus on yourself. You're looking at what everyone else is doing, and then you're like, oh, and then you get into this kind of like web of just comparisons and overthinking, and then you're thinking, I'm so behind, and this, that, and the other, and then it's just like, and then you want to just quit. And then it's like, again, it goes back to like resilience in the last episode, like, but you've got to keep going, and you need to keep that focus on yourself to then be able to get the results that you want.
Yeah, it's crazy how all this stuff just connects. Like we've talked about it, this whole world of mental performance is just this weird like connection web of everything flows into one another. Like what you're saying there, it's one thing where we're talking about the ability to focus and turn it on and off. The kind of sub point under that is, what are we focusing on? And like what you were just saying, if we're focused on our uncontrollables, things that we can't do anything about, we're still just wasting that energy and focusing on the wrong things that leads to negative things, the overthinking, all the stuff you were just talking about. Where instead, if we can take this laser focus and focus on us, focus on what we need to do next, what's our next step, focusing on playing hard, focusing on, responding well to adversity, all that type of stuff is like the effective way to use our ability to focus. Where there's kind of two sides to the coin, we can focus on the good stuff we can do stuff about, or the other junk that's going on that's just going to cause us more problems in the end.
Yeah, definitely. And it goes back to how you react to these things. And again, like making mistakes even in the games, or if a player is kind of what's the word, like trying to get a reaction out of you as well. But it's like, no, you've got to stay focused on the game. And like, for example, like I was at the game, the Man City game on Wednesday, and then Haaland had missed a chance, but you just know that he wasn't happy with himself. And again, he took that, and he took this focus to then make sure he gets a goal in. And obviously he did. But like, it's that kind of that focus that, okay, maybe that mistake, wasn't ideal, but you're not focusing on what went wrong. You can focus on what you can then do next to be able to get the result that you want, because you don't want to end up thinking about what the result could be, or if it's a bad result, what's the consequences of a bad result. But you need to stay focused in the game. And once you're focused in the game, you're thinking about the processes, you are not getting distracted by everything else in the environment.
Right. And like we've talked this whole time about being able to control that focus and turn it on when we need it and turn it off. And that's not like necessarily an easy skill. It's something we have to like learn and teach people about, because it's not natural for us to be able to control those things. So one of the things I talk about when trying to use this tool of focus is putting like a trigger mechanism in place to help us turn it on when we need it. And again, this is going to be like drastically different in all sporting contexts, depending on how often you have to use it, how much time you have each time to turn it on and off, how fast paced things are going, stuff like that. But one thing I always offer is like kind of a kicker to start that refocus mechanism is like a deep breath.
Yeah.
Taking a couple big deep breaths if you have a chance kind of clears us out and lets our mind see like, okay, we gotta get back in here. Or like in my example with baseball, if, I'd be hitting, I'd step in the box, strike ball, whatever happened, step out of the box, take that deep breath, kind of unfocus for a second, take a deep breath, refocus, and then I would do the exact same thing. I would do the same stuff to the dirt, tap home plate the same way with my bat, and then I'm locked in again.
Yeah.
The same type of thing if, I talk about basketball, some kid or somebody is checking in off the bench. They go to the scorer's bench, maybe adjust their uniform, tuck their jersey in, wipe their shoes off, step on the court. Just that like trigger, like a physical thing that you do, or a deep breath, or maybe you say a mantra to yourself. You say, all right, focus, or let's go. Whatever it is for you, again, this is one of those like personalized things. You can find something that clicks with your brain to help you see like, oh, we got to focus. Let's go.
Yeah.
And just putting something in place that's very repeatable, very simple, and easy for you to remember. So in those heated moments when you need to like lock back in real quick, you have something you can just go to and just boom, hit it, and you're good to go again.
Yeah, and it is that reset. And then that's reset in your ability, but also your emotions within all of that. And that's the main thing, is like that focus, like, because it is all psychological, and it is everything that's going off like on like up here. And even actually, I think a good little example of selective attention is, I mean, some people might have seen this, but if you've not seen it, just type in, what is it? It's basketball psychology experiment into like Google. Pause this if you're gonna watch it. But essentially, there's literally, I think, about 6 people, 3 wearing black t-shirts, 3 wearing white t-shirts, and you're asked to count how many times the people wearing white are passing the basketball. And in the middle of it, a gorilla walks through them. And then you're asked, okay, how many passes? And it's about 15 passes. And but then it's like, well, did you see the gorilla? And some people will have seen it, but some people won't. And I always show this example whenever I'm introducing sort of psychology to prospective students. And anyone who did see the gorilla, I'm like, yeah, you weren't focusing. you weren't focusing on the task at hand. And it is it's one of those things where I think it's a good introduction into attention and how that can look like. Because once you're focused on one thing, then suddenly like everything else in like this context doesn't matter. And that can be applied literally in sport. Like if you're focused on the situation at hand, then you won't be distracted by everything else that's going on. Yeah,
once you get really, really good at turning your focus on and getting to that point where you're in that focus zone, everything that doesn't matter kind of like melts away. Like the whole idea there, you're not going to see this gorilla walk through the room.
Yeah.
If you're really locked in, you're not going to hear the person lined up across from you talking trash in your ear. Mm-hmm. You're not going to hear the opposing fans yelling and screaming and going crazy. You're not going to hear your coach blowing up at the official. All that stuff kind of becomes irrelevant if we're able to like really focus and lock in on the task at hand and just be present in that moment and not worry about anything else going on.
Yeah, definitely. So focus is just a big topic that, you know, encompasses so much. And it's not an easy thing. I mean, that's what sports psychs are here to do. So it is a skill in itself, and you'll end up realising that you've picked up this skill as you go along. And maybe you've even realised that sometimes your mind does wander, but then sometimes you're able to bring that back to focus. And a lot of other things that can help you, you know, things like pre-performance routines and even goal setting. So you've got things that you can stick to. Yeah. And it's all about creating habits as you're going along. So it is a huge thing. And it's, again, as we've shown in so many different examples, it's completely dependent to the sport at hand. And even you as an individual, and what are kind of the external factors that play a role in the situation that you're in. Right.
Yeah. Every person that is faced with this, you know, question has to take account of everything going on around them. Not only sport related, but personal stuff. You know, off the field, we are human beings first. So anything that's going on is going to impact everything we're trying to do in sport. So if we're trying to focus, but we know maybe I failed a test this morning, or I'm going through a rough patch with something else, that's going to play a role into it. So being like, there's not necessarily anything we can do to change those things, but just being aware of them is the whole point. And knowing that, like, hey, I've got a lot of stuff going on. Maybe today I have to work really, really hard to focus. Whereas another day it comes kind of easy to me. And just knowing where you fall on that and how you handle outside stuff impacting your mental performance.